Hey guys, this is Echo Soundworks with ADSR, and you're checking out a first look video for Logic Pro X 10.2.3. So this update was just released a couple days ago, and I've been messing around with it, and I wanted to discuss it with you guys and talk about some of the features that I think are relevant, because although it's not as big of an update as like including Alchemy was a few updates ago, there's some really cool stuff bundled into this. Now, this video I want to keep short, so I'm going to talk fast. I apologize if I'm talking too fast, but there's a lot to cover, and I don't want this to get really long and boring. So first things first, I updated this at my home computer first. If you have two computers, definitely do this because you don't want to screw up your main production computer if anything's off. Now, I am running, I don't want to do that, obviously 10.2.3, but at my home, this is my house apartment computer, and we have I'm running OS X Yosemite 10.1.0.5. I have heard that some people have had issues with this with El Capitan, so definitely look into that and investigate. But a good thing you should do when you update is go to your applications folder and back up a copy of your old actual application. So just while you're in this window, hit like Command-Shift-N for Shift-New for a new folder. And I called mine Logic 10.2.old, and then I literally right-clicked on Logic Pro X and I hit Compress. And then I put that compressed file in here. So if anything went really awry, I could just bring it back. All right, let's talk about I'll go over some of like the stability related kind of enhancements first, then we'll talk about the main updates. The cool thing that happened, or that they switched, they did a bunch of just stability and reliability based updates. So they reduced the number of reasons why Logic will unexpectedly quit. One of them for me that was important was Alchemy no longer will just make Logic seize up and freeze when you try to export or import files that have like an EXS instrument containing a bunch of samples, like a piano, for instance. Alchemy opens quicker now, and Alchemy has some updates with like tagging and with kind of like titles and things that are actually on the modulations, which is kind of nice. And then you also have, I don't know if you guys ever did this, but sometimes I'd have to open up two projects, and going back and forth between them would cause Logic to freeze and quit, so that's nice. And then also resizing certain windows would kind of cause it to freeze for me, and so that's nice that those have been improved upon. They've also improved the just hyperthreading support, so it should run a little bit smoother on the hyperthreading capable machines. This is a big one too. If you guys have ever opened up your if you go to preferences here and you go to like your plugin manager, every time you closed it, it would re-scan your core audio. It doesn't do that anymore, so that's really nice. The channel EQ analyzer no longer uses CPU when the plugin window is closed. I didn't even know that until this update, which kind of pisses me off. So for instance, let's say you have like the channel EQ on a track. Let's say like I want to put a channel EQ on this track and I want to analyze it to see what's going on with the frequency. Okay, now if I leave this off and turn off the track, it's actually still using CPU cycles. I didn't even know that, so it doesn't do that anymore. So don't have to, I guess, turn that off, but that's a pretty big one because I feel like a lot of Logic users will use the analyzer in the EQ to kind of check and reference some of their frequencies and issues with their frequencies in the mix, but that's kind of cool. And then with a couple other things they did, the global tracks, I don't know if you guys ever had this, but it actually happened to me and I contacted Apple about it. If I was up here making markers or doing anything with the global tracks open, it would make the playback really sluggish. So that's kind of nice. Doesn't have that happen anymore. And then this is one in the release. I haven't tested it out yet because I haven't tried opening a really big project, but I hope it's true. Logic no longer sometimes takes an unexpectedly long time to load certain large products or projects. That's a kind of an ambiguous term. No longer sometimes takes unexpected time to load certain projects, but maybe other ones it will. I'll test that out, but hopefully that is nice. Now let's get to like the main improvements with this release now that all that's out of the way. Some of the really cool things that they did were they added, and I'm not going to be able to touch on this in this video, but I have tested it out and I do think it's a little higher quality. They improved the sound engine in the Flex editor, more specifically the Flex pitch. So that's huge because most of the times I cannot use the Flex pitch in an actual production that like I want to release. I always have to go to Melodyne because it always adds artifacts and just weird aliasing to the audio. So that hasn't been happening the 2 times I tested it on an audio loop with this update. And hopefully that is a stable thing and it's not going to be like sometimes you get that weird stuff happening. But that's a pretty big one. Now I want to talk about something that like was gracing the main notes on all the like sites that released this, like maybe it was like blog site or something, and they added a bunch of Chinese loops to the Apple loops and a couple Chinese instruments. I didn't even download those extra loops because I'm not going to use them, so I didn't want to take up hard disk space. And it's clear that Apple's doing this because they want to break more into the Chinese market. China's a big market, tech industry, right? I get that, but that's not something you should be like, you have Chinese loops. Like for us Logic users out there actually use it, I would say not a lot of us are going to be like salivating at the mouth being like, damn, I can't wait to chop up that Chinese traditional music loop. But it could be kind of cool, just not for me. I didn't download it on my home computer because I don't want to take up the hard drive. So definitely, I'm not going to touch on that in the video because I didn't even download it, but just know that it does exist. All right, let's get to some of the other features that were actually updated in, I think, a really cool way. And if you remember a couple updates ago, Logic started to make other plugins outside of the channel EQ to have the Retina display. And what they did was they actually added features to a lot of those. Like they updated the stereo delay and they made it really cool. It's super easy to use now. They added new features. Well, they've reskinned and given the Retina display appearance to 7 more plugins. I'm going to touch on some of those because some of them actually have new features. So the first one here is the Noise Gate, and the Noise Gate actually has some really cool new features. Over here on the right, you have characteristics, and the characteristics are just 2 different types of filters, which is really cool. But you have band pass and band reject. You also have has a ducker included, which is really cool. So you have a ducker right here, so you can do gate and ducking, which is amazing. This makes this my kind of go-to ducker now because it just makes sense. And gate, I usually use FabFilter's gate. But I'll probably be using this one a little bit more now because I do like using stock plugins whenever I can. Just kind of it's kind of a cool feeling to be like, oh, I can use the stuff that actually came with my DAW. All right, so that's the ducker and then the filters, kind of the coolest new features in that. There's a couple more, but definitely look at that and play. That's pretty cool. Now we also have they updated the skin to the Exciter, and I'm going to put up pictures of all the old ones as we go. The Exciter just has a nice new interface, obviously. It's pretty much similar. You have 2 different colors, harmonics, but you have a really hands-on way of editing the frequency, which is nice. Now, the pitch shifter, the Logic's pitch shifter is one of the worst ones in any DAW, but it's getting a little bit better. The pitch shifter here is kind of cool now that, for instance, let's say you're like trying to pitch shift a vocal track or a vocal loop to fit the track or fit the key of your new track. But I mean, if you load this up here, we'll recall the default. The delay is at 10 milliseconds by default on these, so it's like that's not that very helpful, and you can't turn it down. You can turn latency compensation off, which is nice now. But if you go to manual, and this was like hidden in the drop down before, you can turn the delay down all the way to 2 milliseconds, and then with the latency compensation on, it should be pretty good. But it still doesn't have the greatest pitch editing capabilities. Past about, in my opinion, like 2 or 3 semitones up or down. It just sounds bad. But they updated that skin. Now another plugin that has, it's kind of actually new to Logic with this update, is the loudness meter with the LUFS metering support. So that stands for loudness units full scale. So the popular way to measure like the perceived loudness of your mix is a little bit more of a realistic, real world metering plugin or metering specificity versus like peak or even RMS for that matter. So they have that. I don't want to get into a whole tutorial in this video about what LUFS is. That's a whole video on its own, but just know it is there. Now they've also updated certain elements of the multimeter. Multimeter in Logic is actually pretty darn good now. So you have different modes of viewing the multimeter in Logic. I don't know if you guys know this or really mess with this, but you have full, you have controls, which would just be the controls. If you're more of like less of a visual guy, more of a sliders guy, you have compact, which will then allow you to only see either the goniometer or the analyzer, and now you can switch between those. So if we play this track right now, and I right-click and hit goniometer, it's on the goniometer, and back and forth. You can also change your metering types by right-clicking. So that's kind of cool. But I usually keep this on full, So I don't really... I just personally switch back and forth that way. So with these new 7 plugins that got reskinned with some added new features, I would say almost all, there's probably like 3 or 4 outside of Delay Designer and Space Designer and the compressor that don't have the new interface. So it's kind of nice. Everything looks new, looks fresh, which is cool. So those updates, and then the update to the pitch editor, the pitch editing and the flex editor being higher quality, I think are some of the biggest reasons to update to this version of Logic Pro X. Now, there's another feature that's kind of cool, and that is you can nudge automation. You can actually nudge automation points, which is cool. So if we bring this section right here where our nudge points are, you can see that you can nudge value. You can actually just move the selected automation via nudge points. So this is this instrument right here. It's actually a Kontakt instrument that I am working on right now. I'm creating. This is like the pre-alpha version. But what we're going to do is we're going to modulate the pan of this. So we're going to click read, or make sure it's on read. We're going to go to pan. And this isn't going to be the most musical example, but let me make a couple points here. And we'll pan that. So let's look at this. All right, well, that's actually kind of cool. Not as weird as I thought. Okay, so that's what we got going on there. Now, what you can do is you can click on selected points here. And I'm on tick right now, so let's go to a different value. Let's go to an 1/8 note, and let's move that over an 1/8 note, right? See how it nudged it over? That's kind of cool because you can kind of snap things to your grid a little bit easier and then mess around with moving things around without having to like really zoom in, change your grid divisions. I actually don't hate that effect on this track right now, but that's actually a really cool feature, and I think it's something that is kind of nice because you can set up key commands for that, obviously. You can create nudge values to be a key command of your liking. You can use a stock key command. It's really cool. You can just open up your automation lane, click on, if there's a volume, pan, effect, whatever it may be, something coming from within a synth, you can just nudge it over real quick. So that's a really useful feature. But that sums up this look at, or my look at what I thought were some of the coolest new features that are really prominent to the production and mixing process in Logic Pro X 10.2.3. There's a bunch of other stuff updated, like I said, stability, reliability, and just general little issues there and here and there. If you guys have any questions or comments, let me know below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I am Echo Soundworks. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you haven't subscribed to ADSR's YouTube channel, definitely do that. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.